On Wednesday, the 2nd of May, Leeds University Business School's Confucius Institute hosted a talk by author, economist, broadcaster, and speaker Linda Yueh to provide her comments on the changing landscape of the Chinese economy. Leeds Student Television caught up with Linda before her talk. So first, 5 years ago in 2013, you published a book on China's growth. So could you discuss some of the key things that you discussed in that book?
Well, I wrote that book so that people didn't have to read thousands of pages of economic research like I did to work out what has caused this remarkable growth of China. So China was poorer than Africa in 1990, and it's now become the world's second biggest economy. And it's pretty much eradicated extreme poverty. It has gotten rid of diseases like malaria. And in the next few years, China is likely to become the world's biggest economy. So what the book does is it looks at the evidence of China's growth since 1979. It applies various economic models and explanations to that growth in order to extrapolate to see whether or not China can do what it hopes to do for the next period of its growth, which is to become prosperous. And that's something that a country of that size, which accounts for a fifth of the world's population, no country of that size has ever managed.
And in particular, one of the things that yourself and a lot of other economists often talk about as being one of the next challenges for China's economy is to rebalance their economy. So what exactly does rebalancing an economy mean for China?
Well, for different countries, it certainly means different things. In the UK, it means making things again. In America, it means making things again. So I think for China, they already make a lot of stuff. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to rebalance towards a more sustainable set of growth drivers. So if you manufacture, you tend to invest. And that's fine when you're industrializing and becoming a middle-income country. But to become prosperous, China needs a more diverse set of drivers. So rebalancing in China means moving the economy more towards services and still have manufacturing, but, as I say, a more balanced set of growth drivers. So that means rebalancing to rely more on their own consumers. So that would mean domestic demand being a bigger part of China's growth than relying on export growth. It's still China's still the world's biggest trader, but it's about contributors to growth.
And you're going to be discussing what has changed in terms of the China landscape since the publishing of the book. So what are the main things that you're going to be discussing today?
I'm going to be focused quite a lot on what China is planning to do until 2049. These are all very long-term plans, but that is how China tends to see its economy. It produces 5-year plans, but it often produces decade-long plans. So probably over the last 5 years, what China has really turned to focus on are two things. One is increasing innovation, and the other one is becoming globally competitive. The reason why these two things, which I write about in my book as what we should expect and for China to do, is because if you have an economy which is going to hit the middle income country trap, which is when most middle income countries, when they get to a certain level of income, they essentially slow down so much they never become rich. So there's only about a quarter of the world's countries are high income. So to overcome this trap means becoming more innovative. So China's invested quite a lot in innovation over the past few years, and this is something that they absolutely need to do. The second thing is creating globally competitive firms and having more of a global footprint. So another trait of a country that has matured is that it becomes a net capital exporter, which China in the last few years has become. So that means China now invests more overseas than it takes in. So that has implications for how the global economy is governed, because a country this size of China, once it starts to invest overseas, has a greater say in how trade and investment, how these norms are shaped. And so I think both of these things are absolutely critical to China's own development, but also essential to the rest of us in the world economy.
Perfect. And the last question I wanted to ask you, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot more interest for Chinese students coming over and studying in the UK, learning the Chinese language, learning the English language, consuming British TV and things like that, compared to how much British students go and study in China and etc. So for all the British students watching now, why should us British students take an interest in China and the Chinese economy?
Because it's the world's second biggest economy, and it will become the world's biggest economy, not on a per capita basis. In other words, China will overtake the US in absolute size. That's because China has 1 billion more people than the United States. It doesn't mean that the average Chinese will be wealthy, but it does mean that as an economy, as a market, China will be the most important global player in the coming years. So that means that British students and students elsewhere, the familiarity that we have here with the United States, with its president, with its economic policymakers, we need that level of familiarity, I think, with China. And taking an interest, traveling to China, learning a bit more about it, I think it's just a good way of preparing yourself to work in the global economy of the 21st century.
Linda, thank you very much.
Thank you.